Display her on the projection. Allow the whole audience to witness what an utter disaster truly appears like. Those were the spiteful remarks from Victor Langford, the tycoon CEO of Langford Enterprises, a figure obsessed with openly demolishing his former spouse before the international business magnates. He desired her diminished to nothing, a miserable afterthought in the triumphant chronicle of his rise. He required her to seem insignificant, shattered, and completely disgraced, a specter lingering at the fringes of his dazzling achievements. As the murmurs in the lavish hall evolved into sneers and derisive chuckles, she merely remained in the obscurity, her quietude and vast reservoir of perseverance soaking up every malicious remark. What Victor Langford never realized, what he was fundamentally unable to grasp, was that the lady he sought to obliterate harbored a revelation so explosive it could crumble the core of his dominion. It was a fact that, once revealed, would leave the entire splendid event mute, transforming his instant of glory into a saga of devastation. Have you ever pondered what occurs when the individual you attempt to annihilate is the soul, one who genuinely holds your confidences? At times, the most profound degradation is merely the tranquility preceding a tempest of magnificent retribution. This is the tale of a lady thrust into obscurity in the exact instant her reticence converted his blaring arrogance into his collapse. And this evening, I am present to recount her narrative. Prior to immersing ourselves in the core of this turmoil, I possess a modest yet profoundly significant appeal. If these accounts of fortitude and fairness echo with you, kindly think about joining the channel via subscription. Your backing is the vital essence that enables us to elevate suppressed perspectives and to disseminate narratives of bravery that merit being broadcast worldwide. Each occasion you tap that subscribe icon, you're not merely viewing content. You're becoming part of an international collective that trusts in the potency of honesty. And in the section for remarks underneath, kindly inform us of your viewing location. I yearn to observe the extent of these tales' reach, for collectively, we are not solely narrating. We are erecting a bastion of optimism. The evening her existence disintegrated, Elena Hargrove sat solitary in the barren hush of her kitchen. 3 years prior, the expansive Chicago condominium, once an emblem of her existence alongside Victor, now resembled an ornate enclosure, every resonance magnifying her isolation. The glass timepiece on the stone shelf chimed with a disconcerting volume, each tick a mallet strike, underscoring that the existence she recognized had just been methodically disassembled. Her mobile device quivered on the chilled stone surface, the display illuminating with a barrage of alerts. She required no inspection. The venom had already permeated every aspect of her routine. Everyone in Chicago, and shortly the globe, knew her spouse Victor Langford had been captured in images at a philanthropic event, not merely alongside another lady, but with her closest companion, Sophia Grant. Elena's palm, delicate and quivering, extended toward the device. Her digit lingered above the display before descending, and there it lay, displayed across numerous scandal publications. The image, Victor with his limb possessively encircling Sophia, their expressions predatory and victorious as though they had seized a realm. The sturdy timber entrance swung ajar, the noise of his bespoke Italian footwear tapping on the refined flooring, a customary fatal blow. Victor Langford sauntered inside, his formal attire flawless, his necktie casually undone, the atmosphere encircling him dense with the aroma of premium whiskey and Sophia's fragrance. He appeared as a monarch returning from a victorious expedition, not a gentleman who had just fractured a 15-year union. Elena Hargrove stood, the mobile gripped in her palm like an instrument of confrontation. "Victor," she uttered, her tone a terse crack. "Is it factual?" He raised a meticulously styled brow, his demeanor one of slight irritation. "Is what factual, dear?" She extended the device toward him, the radiant display a stark indictment in the subdued illumination. This depicts you and Sophia, my confidant from university days. Assure me this is fabricated. Victor Langford glanced briefly at the image before discarding his silver vehicle keys onto the surface. He exhaled a prolonged, fatigued breath, as if her anguish were a bothersome triviality. Elena, let's avoid theatrical excess. You recognized this wasn't viable. For years, you recognized I required additional. Required additional. Her tone splintered. The resonance of shattering crystal. You required her. Do you comprehend the extent of what you have inflicted upon me? Upon our bond? Well, I've inflicted. His inflection intensified, shifting from nonchalant detachment to icy metal. Elena, let's embrace stark candor briefly. You were never suited for this realm. You couldn't match the pace. I am constructing a heritage, a dominion that will echo through eras. You, my love, remain mired in nostalgia. Sophia comprehends authority. She grasps drive. She enhances my stature. You never could. Her respiration faltered in her gullet. The offhand brutality of his statements felt like tangible strikes. I devoted everything to you, Victor. I bolstered you when you were merely a visionary with a hazardous concept. I had faith in you. He interrupted her, his tone as frigid and merciless as a dawn in winter. And you fulfilled your role splendidly. But that role has concluded. Cease extending this torment. The dissolution documents have been prepared for weeks. My attorneys will contact you. Sign them, accept the compensation, and proceed. Her form commenced to quiver. A fierce, irrepressible shudder. Thus that defines my entirety. A role that concluded. 15 years of my existence merely discarded. Exactly, he affirmed, a subtle, harsh grin adorning his mouth. Discarded. The term conveyed with such precise aloofness ignited her essence. In the ensuing days, she attempted resistance, but Victor was a whirlwind assault. His juridical squad was a horde of predators, dismantling her reputation in tribunals and publications. To the public, he was the ingenious, magnetic pioneer, and she was the resentful, rejected consort. The press devoured the storyline he fabricated. Captions extolled his fresh, influential duo with Sophia, while depicting Elena as a frail, envious lady grasping at bygones. The disloyalty pierced further when it originated from her kin. One dusk, her sibling Marcus telephoned. Elena, he commenced, his tone tense. What on earth is transpiring? I'm encountering reports. Individuals claim you're endeavoring to tarnish Victor's standing. She stiffened, the device sensation like a frozen slab against her cheek. Me? Marcus? He betrayed me with my dearest ally. He departed for her. And you're concerned for his standing? A weighty quiet suspended between them prior to Marcus's tone firming. Elena, avoid complicating this beyond necessity. Perhaps this proves beneficial. Victor, he truly surpassed you. He's functioning at an elevated plane. Revulsion surged in her abdomen. Marcus, are you aligning with him? I'm adopting pragmatism, he retorted. Victor is ascending to the stars. You're anchored earthbound. Release him. Cease resisting. Her gullet constricted so severely she scarcely articulated. You fail to perceive it, correct? He's exploiting you akin to how he exploited me. Sufficient. Marcus's tone was level, conclusive. He extended me a high-ranking role at his emerging Pacific Division. Refrain from contacting me if your intent is solely to assail the individual securing my lineage's prospects. The connection severed. Her own sibling bartered for an advancement. The ultimate communal condemnation arrived weeks subsequently. Victor Langford positioned himself on a platform at an international innovation summit in Aspen. Cameras from every principal media flashing. Sophia Grant positioned adjacent, emanating a conceited triumph. As for my history, Victor Langford declared, his grin as keen as a fragment of ice. Suffice to say, I bore unnecessary burden, an individual incapable of grasping the magnitude of my foresight. But presently, he clasped Sophia's palm. With a genuine ally at my side, I am at last liberated to ascend to the pinnacles I was invariably fated for. The assembly of tycoons and sector leaders burst into mirth and acclaim. Elena Hargrove, the lady who had scrutinized his initial enterprise blueprint and soothed his anxieties prior to his premier financier encounter, was formally a communal jest. Yet someplace profound beyond the barrier of her reticence, an alternative force was awakening. She wasn't fractured. She wasn't vanquished. She was strategizing. She was biding. Awaiting the occasion, Victor Langford would discover that reticence constitutes not frailty. Her chronicle wasn't concluded. It was merely initiating its subsequent chapter. 3 years had elapsed since Victor Langford dispatched the dissolution documents via courier to her residence, departing as though their 15 years conjoint were not, but a subpar investment he had prudently divested. Elena Hargrove recalled those initial months with a lucidity that persisted in chilling her. Days merged into nights wherein she couldn't muster the vigor to depart her bedding. The immense pressure of the treachery pinned her to the bedding like a corporeal force. The realm appeared ashen. Nourishment tasted of cinders, and her mirror image was that of an unfamiliar entity. Individuals on the avenues of Chicago would murmur as she traversed. That's her, the one Victor Langford discarded for her closest ally. Certain among them would even sneer. But duration is an unyielding carver. Agony can either corrode you into oblivion or sculpt you into something keener, something tougher. For Elena, the agony served as a whetstone. She commenced with the singular element Victor had perpetually undervalued, yet perpetually employed, her aptitude for figures. She initiated in a minuscule leased enclosure with sputtering overhead illumination a universe distant from the radiant spires of her bygone. She reminisced every extended vigil expended scrutinizing Victor's nascent fiscal frameworks, identifying the pivotal oversights he overlooked, rendering his disordered computations harmonious while he slumbered. If she could erect a dominion for him covertly, she could erect one for herself overtly. Her premier substantive prospect emerged from a faltering apparel firm teetering on insolvency. The proprietor, a weathered veteran merchant named Mr. Kensington, scrutinized her credentials with acute doubt. "You're Victor Langford's former spouse." Elena encountered his stare, her posture erect. "I am." He reclined, his seat groaning in dissent. "The publications depicted you as, well, let's merely state, not the fiscal prodigy behind the scepter. Why should I entrust you with the helm of my floundering vessel?" A surge of warmth ascended to her countenance, the specter of communal degradation, but her tone remained resolute, resonant as a chime. "Mr. Kensington, disregard every tale you peruse. Victor excelled at vending the aspiration, but I ensured the base was sturdy. I equilibrated the ledgers that permitted him to construct his dominion. I can manage your disarray." Kensington appraised her across a protracted, taut interval, then emitted a resigned exhalation. "Very well, you possess 1 month. Demonstrate I'm not erring." She exceeded that. Within 3 weeks, she had unraveled a decade of intricate bookkeeping, uncovered a substantial misappropriation plot by his prior financial officer, and reorganized his liabilities in a manner that preserved the firm millions. One twilight, Kensington entered her compact workspace, clutching a register. "You weren't exaggerating," he stated, a trace of reluctant admiration in his inflection. "You possess a talent. Victor Langford is a profound imbecile." Elena permitted herself the tiniest of grins. "Indeed he is." From that solitary salvage, her esteem commenced to expand in discrete, potent networks. Assignment by assignment, transaction by transaction, she progressed from apparel to innovation ventures to property development. She mastered the elaborate rhythm of finance takeovers, the concealed dialect of overseas ledgers, the sublime craft of forbearance. When she executed her inaugural significant procurement, a collection of impaired commercial estates that all others deemed hazardous, the established financiers of Chicago scoffed. That's a burial ground, one notable agent derided at a midday gathering. She's squandering viable funds on worthless remnants. Elena merely grinned, her subtle, cryptic grin. We shall observe. 6 months subsequently, following judicious refurbishment and repositioning of the estates precisely as the marketplace pivoted, that identical agent accosted her at a function, oscillating his cranium in incredulity. I fail to comprehend how you anticipated that. You transmuted debris into a treasure trove. Elena elevated her sparkling goblet. At times, the most precious gems are those discarded by others. By the conclusion of the second annum, she was no longer a jest or a phantom. She was a murmured myth, a wraith. Capital providers commenced pursuing her, captivated by the enigma. Some acquainted with her saga couldn't resist probing her. At a high-stakes bargaining session, a notoriously combative investment overseer inclined across the lustrous timber expanse, a sneer on his visage. Inform me, Miss Sinclair, are you pursuing all this to amass wealth, or merely to demonstrate to your former spouse that you're not the lamentable being he portrayed? The chamber hushed. Her full cadre suspended respiration. Elena confronted his patronizing stare with an aura of tranquil poise. Why must it constitute solely one? She responded fluidly. Wealth validates itself. And regarding inadequacy, inadequacy is merely the cost of instruction for the paramount schooling on the planet. The gentleman regarded her, then cast his skull rearward and chortled. A resonant timbre of authentic esteem. Reasonable. Let's forge an accord. By then, she no longer functioned from a confined enclosure. Her novel enterprise, Lumina Ventures, claimed the uppermost 3 levels of a modern crystalline edifice in downtown Chicago with a sweeping vista of the metropolis that Victor's personal quarters once oversaw. She commanded legions of evaluators, jurists, and tacticians laboring for her. And nonetheless, to the broader realm, she persisted as a puzzle, her designation infrequently surfacing in publications. One drizzly midweek afternoon, her youthful, devoted aide, Lila, erupted into her workspace, her complexion flushed with zeal, grasping a substantial dossier. Miss Sinclair, she declared, her tone quivering faintly. The ultimate exchange transpired. It's finalized. You presently possess the dominant stake in Langford Enterprises. For an extended instant, Elena uttered nothing. She merely gazed at the papers, at the bold, haughty emblem of the firm Victor had erected. Her firm now. Lila's eyes widened with incredulity. You truly accomplished it. You command his dominion. Elena extended and contacted the dossier, her digits outlining the emblem. No, Lila, she stated, her tone gentle yet resolute. She halted, a cosmos of significance in her gaze. I command my firm. He simply hasn't been notified yet. That dusk, for the premier instance in 3 years, Marcus telephoned her. Elena, he stated, his tone tentative, wary. I've been encountering murmurs on the avenues. Inconceivable matters. Individuals assert you're your principal contender now. Is any of it authentic? She reclined in her hide seat, the radiant urban illuminations her scenery, her inflection frosty. It's amusing, Marcus. You lack belief in me when I held merely veracity. Why the abrupt interest now? Marcus cleared his gullet, the resonance of despair crackling via the device. Observe, I erred. Victor, the Pacific role, never emerged. He severed me 6 months past. Perhaps we might recommence. We're kin. We might collaborate. Elena permitted the quiet to linger airborne, a frigid, ponderous coverlet. Then she articulated, her terms exact and incisive. You selected an employment proposition over your sibling. Marcus. You rendered your choice, Elena. Pardon, you my sibling. A tart chortle escaped her mouth. A sibling you betrayed for the allure of an executive suite. You ought to have perused the stipulations. His tone evolved into a frantic supplication. Refrain from this. Refrain from excluding me. I require your aid. Elena's terms were the serene, subdued conclusiveness of a sealing portal. Thus did I. 3 years prior, and you were absent. Farewell, Marcus. She terminated the connection, and for the premier time, she sensed no anguish, solely resolution. Later that week, Elena positioned herself beside the full-height panes of her workspace, observing the ceaseless stream of illuminations beneath. Lila entered unobtrusively. Do you ever contemplate him? She inquired gently. Elena refrained from pivoting from the pane every solitary day. And should he behold you presently? Asuble, scarcely detectable green gracia de Elena's mood. Oh, he shall exceedingly shortly. Lila wavered. What do you intend to utter to him? Elena ultimately pivoted, her eyes conveying a serene, unassailable authority. Not, I shan't need to utter a solitary term. My attendance shall suffice. 3 years following her dramatic descent from favor, Elena Hargrove was no longer the fractured consort, the overlooked lady. She was a potency. She was authoritative. She was prepared. And although Victor Langford continued to strut on the international platform, chortling for the lenses with Sophia Grant adorned on his limb, he was serenely, haughtily oblivious that the lady he had endeavored to enter beneath the burden of ignominy was already perched on superior terrain, observing him, awaiting the ideal instant to emerge from obscurity and into radiance. The occasion of judgment was approaching, and upon its advent, Victor would ultimately comprehend that the reticence he had so haughtily derided was never frailty. It was the resonance of authority whetting its blade. If you haven't joined via subscription yet, now would constitute the ideal juncture to integrate our collective by depressing that subscribe icon. Via narratives akin to Elena's, we strive to construct a realm of optimism and furnish a platform for ladies and offspring who have confronted mistreatment and inequity internationally. You can propel us to persist in this endeavor by subscribing and activating your alert chime so you never overlook a narrative that genuinely signifies. Additionally, inform us in the remarks of your viewing locale and whether any segment of this narrative resonated with you individually. The summons materialized on a leaf of thick ivory-hued stationery. The Langford Enterprises emblem imprinted in lustrous silver. Elena regarded it, her digits outlining the flamboyant script. Langford Enterprises' yearly Visionaries Banquet. At the base, inscribed in Victor's haughty, inclined penmanship, were 4 terms that oozed with disdain. Your attendance is solicited. She nearly burst into unrestrained laughter. Solicited? Nay, this was a mandate, an obligatory display. She discerned precisely its nature. A communal exhibition. Victor desired her present. A woeful apparition at his banquet, so he could flaunt his prosperity and reiterate to all, encompassing her, how profoundly she had ostensibly plummeted. The entry chime resounded. Elena unlatched it to discover her former university companion Nora, clutching 2 mugs of brew and a countenance of intense apprehension. Don't you presume to inform me you're genuinely attending this affair, Nora stated, her eyes instantaneously fixating on the summons on the ledge. Elena retrieved it, a peculiarly composed grin on her visage. He dispatched it personally. He desires me present. He yearns to degrade you once more for final emphasis, Nora countered, her tone escalating. Refrain from granting him the gratification, Elena. Kindly remain indoors. We can procure delivery fare or view dreadful films. Anything except striding into that den of serpents. Elena's composure was disconcerting. She creased the summons with purposeful meticulousness and inserted it into her satchel. I'll attend. Nora seized her limb, her eyes beseeching. Why? Why would you voluntarily stride into his snare? Because Elena stated, her tone a subdued whisper of iron. At times, the sole method to neutralize a snare is to advance directly into it with vision unclouded. The intelligence of her planned participation disseminated through the privileged networks of Chicago like a contagion. It attained her sibling Marcus within days. He telephoned, his inflection frenzied. Elena, I just learned Victor summoned you to the banquet. You're not earnestly attending, correct? I am, she responded, her tone uniform. Marcus emitted an exasperated exhalation. For heaven's sake, why? He's orchestrating your setup for another communal massacre. Do you desire to become a derided figure anew? Do you crave the lenses in your countenance? Individuals murmuring about your tragic appearance. Elena's tone persisted unervingly composed. Marcus, if I permitted murmurs to govern my existence, I would have dissipated 3 years prior. You've endured. Affirmative, but Victor remains Victor. He doesn't yield, Elena. He obliterates. A subtle, scarcely perceptible grin graced her mouth. Thus do cyclones, but ultimately they dissipate. Marcus was mute momentarily. I fail to comprehend you any longer. You were once so delicate. Now you converse as though you're scheming something. Perhaps I am. Elena, I'm imploring you. Refrain from attending. He shall devastate you. She concluded the connection with a solitary chilling declaration. No, Marcus. This occasion, I'll be the solitary figure remaining upright once the gale subsides. Meanwhile, across the metropolis in his condominium overlooking Lake Michigan, Victor Langford swirled a tumbler of aged cognac. Sophia Grant, adorned in gems, reclined on a satin divan, perusing a slate device. Did she confirm? Sophia inquired, a listless timbre in her tone. Not yet, Victor affirmed with a conceited beam. But she'll arrive. Elena invariably yields under duress. She'll enter clad in some mournful bargain attire, her skull lowered, endeavoring to feign some woeful illusion of valor. And upon doing so, he sneered, I shall individually ensure every lens in that chamber seizes what authentic inadequacy resembles. Sophia chortled, a timbre akin to fracturing crystal, though a glimmer of disquiet traversed her traits. She's woeful, Victor. But are you certain this proves judicious? Why prod a dormant beast? He directed her a frigid, rejecting glance. This concerns not her. This pertains to fortifying my storyline. It's regarding displaying the council, the capital providers, the entire globe that I have advanced to grander and superior pursuits. Elena's attendance is simply the ultimate mark in my prosperity chronicle, a vital, respiring corroboration that I enhanced. Sophia's grin reemerged, though her eyes lingered vigilant. Well then, beloved, let's furnish them a spectacle they'll eternally recall. In the days preceding the banquet, Elena's itinerary was a vortex of coded communications and unobtrusive assemblies. Nora, lodging with her for bolstering, observed a procession of enigmatic callers. Gentlemen in flawlessly tailored garments arriving in obsidian vehicles with obscured panes, departing Elena's workspace hours later with countenances of astonishment and reverence. One midday, Nora could no longer restrain her inquisitiveness. What transpires, Elena? You're altered, clandestine. Who are these individuals? Elena merely imbibed her herbal infusion and grinned, merely concluding a few dangling threads with former associates. Former associates lacked protective escorts and tote cases resembling those of national leaders, Nora countered. You're concealing something monumental. Elena inclined forward, her eyes composed, yet piercingly acute. Not concealing, Nora. Aligning. A tremor coursed Nora's spine. Elena, what have you been devising? Elena refrained from responding straightforwardly. She merely positioned her palm atop Nora's and stated gently, confide in me. The dusk preceding the banquet, Elena stationed herself before her expansive wardrobe. a sequence of superb raiment suspended in immaculate array. She trailed her palm along the material of an unadorned, refined ebony satin frock, the one she had selected. Her mobile hummed on the dressing table. A lone-coded dispatch materialized on the display. All resources positioned for tomorrow, anticipating your directive. She inscribed rearward 2 terms. Maintain stance. For an instant, she sealed her eyes, permitting the vision of the lady she had been to arise. The sorrowing consort, the degraded pariah, the lady the realm had derided. That lady was a wraith, a reminiscence. Tomorrow dusk, Victor would perceive. Tomorrow dusk, the entire realm would perceive, and she wouldn't necessitate elevating her tone. Her reticence would constitute the most resonant timbre in the chamber. The dusk of the banquet materialized, a gale enveloped in plush. The metropolis was a weave of radiant illuminations, and Langford Enterprises had transmuted the majestic hall of the Ritz-Carlton into a testimonial to extravagant opulence. It gleamed with torrents of gemstone and aureate, the atmosphere dense with the fragrance of lavish scents and the clatter of effervescent goblets. Streamlined conveyances unloaded attendees into a delirium of pulsing lenses and clamoring chroniclers. Victor Langford stationed himself at the ingress like a sovereign, his grin refined, his grips resolute. Sophia Grant was a spectacle of gems and hubris at his flank, her pendant a galaxy of pilfered radiance. "She'll materialize," Victor murmured to her, his eyes surveying the incoming throng with rapacious eagerness. Sophia's mouth curled into a sneer. "And upon her manifestation, I'll remain precisely here, beloved, to reiterate to her all she forfeited." Internally, the ambience crackled with tattle. All recognized Elena had been summoned. The conjecture proliferated. Some anticipated her to creep inward, a shattered entity pursuing compassion. Others were convinced she wouldn't presume to expose her visage. Leagues distant in her serene residence, Elena secured the latch of an unadorned, refined gemstone pendant. Nora paced anxiously behind her, wringing her palms. "You needn't undertake this, Elena," she stated for what seemed the 100th instance. "You appear stunning, but this isn't a festivity. It's a liquidation, and Victor doesn't engage equitably." Elena contemplated her reflection. The lady gazing rearward was not the one Victor had rejected. Her raven tresses cascaded in gentle, restrained undulations. The ebony satin frock was a proclamation of subdued, fatal authority. But it was her eyes that conveyed the most striking metamorphosis. They were composed, steadfast, and wholly bereft of the dread that had once plagued them. "I recognize precisely its nature, Nora," she stated gently, "and that's exactly why I must attend. What if he endeavors to injure you anew, to mortify you?" Elena donned a duo of ebony spike heels, her motions smooth and leisurely. "Then permit him to endeavor." Her mobile hummed. A solitary dispatch glowed on the display. "All participants positioned. We anticipate your advent." Nora creased her brow. "Who persists in messaging you? What transpires?" Elena encountered her companion's anxious eyes in the reflector and proffered a subtle, comforting grin. "Merely commerce." "Commerce?" Nora reiterated her tone, a blend of reverence and alarm. "My deity, Elena, you transformed. You're sturdier. I fail to discern whether to esteem you or dread for you." "Embrace both," Elena murmured, retrieving her compact and striding toward the portal. Exterior the inn, a fresh surge of lens, pulses ignited as a streamlined, unembellished obsidian saloon halted at the edge. The chauffeur unlatched the portal, and Elena Hargrove emerged. A communal inhalation undulated through the press assembly. Chroniclers advanced, their lenses snapping in a frenzy. "Is that Elena Hargrove?" "My deity, she appears extraordinary." "Did you observe that frock?" The murmurs were no longer derisive. They brimmed with astonished incredulity. Her sibling Marcus, who had been lingering proximate the ingress, hastened forward, nearly tottering. "Elena," he whispered, his tones subdued and pressing. "You cannot be here. Victor lurks within, awaiting to degrade you. Kindly pivot." Elena's stare was chilly. Her inflection uniform. "Compose yourself, Marcus. I'm not the lady you forsook." He furrowed, perplexed. "What do you imply?" "You'll perceive," she stated, gliding beyond him devoid of secondary glimpse. The resonance of her heels on the stone flooring was incisive, intentional, and conclusive. Internally, a surge of quietude trailed her ingress. Crania pivoted, discourse faltered, and expired. Elena Hargrove navigated the sumptuous hall, not as an attendee, but as though she merited it. No, as though she dominated it. Victor's conceited grin wavered for a fractional second prior to his facade of hubris snapping rearward into position. He advanced, his limb clamped about Sophia. "Elena," he proclaimed aloud, sufficient for all adjacent to overhear. "How audacious of you to manifest. I doubted you'd muster the valor." Elena's mouth curved into a subtle, cognizant grin. "Valor isn't quantified by festivity summons. Victor." A jittery ripple coursed through the spectators. Sophia compressed Victor's limb, her tone a poisonous murmur. "Elena, beloved, you appear well superior to my anticipation. Inform me, who attired you this dusk?" Elena inclined her skull marginally, her stare encompassing Sophia's lavish gemstone pendant. "No entity attires me, Sophia. I attire myself. Might you affirm the same?" Audibly stunned, inhalations undulated through the attendees. Victor's mandible stiffened. He inclined inward, his tone an enraged hush. "Recall your locale, Elena. This constitutes my realm, my dusk. Refrain from rendering yourself a buffoon." Elena's serene grin never fluctuated. Mortification pertains to those retaining something to forfeit. Her terms were an enigma he couldn't unravel, and it disquieted him. From across the chamber, Nora observed, her essence throbbing with a fusion of apprehension and elation. "She's not present to serve as a casualty," she pondered. "She's present to conclude a segment." "Proximate," an age council affiliate murmured to another. "Do you observe how individuals greet her with deference? She conveys a aura nearly as if he faltered, oscillating his cranium as though to dispel it." Elena navigated the assembly with a subdued elegance, clasping palms, interchanging terse, agreeable terms with individuals Victor deemed his firmest confederates. But as she traversed, more than one potent capital provider accorded her a discreet, deferential inclination. It was scarcely noticeable, but indisputably existent. Victor perceived it. His grin rigidified. Something was intrinsically amiss. He couldn't pinpoint it, but the chamber's equilibrium felt aberrant. Sophia inclined inward, murmuring in his auditory organ. Why do they regard her thusly? Why do they treat her as though she signifies? Victor's eyes constricted, affixed on Elena. Because they pity her. She's not. This dusk, all shall be reminded of that verity. But as Elena elevated a goblet of liquid and encountered his antagonistic stare from across the chamber, her countenance composed and indecipherable, Victor Langford sensed for the premier instance in 3 protracted years a keen glimmer of uncertainty. The banquet had merely commenced, and while he trusted he was erecting the platform for Elena's ultimate pulverizing degradation, the actuality was far more alarming. The snare he presumed he had positioned was already constricting, not encircling her, but encircling him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor initiated, his tone reverberating from the platform. "I desire to express gratitude to you all for attending to commemorate another unprecedented annum for Langford Enterprises. This constitutes a distinctive dusk for me, not solely because we embark on an audacious fresh chapter, but because I can disseminate it with the individuals who genuinely signify. He paused, drawing Sophia nearer, his eyes locating Elena in the assembly, and naturally, with the lady who has bestowed upon me the vigor, the foresight, and the affection to attain it all, the variety of ally a gentleman of my prominence merits, courteous, if marginally tense, acclaim permeated the chamber. Victor's stare lingered on Elena, a manifest communal affront. But, naturally, he persisted, his tone oozing with simulated earnestness. Existence concerns acquisition. Certain alliances impede you. Certain individuals simply lack the aspiration, the resilience to ascend alongside you. And when that transpires, you must possess the ruthlessness to render a selection. The assembly chortled, a subdued, uneasy resonance. Dozens of ocular pairs darted toward Elena, awaiting her to disintegrate. She remained flawlessly immobile, her bearing majestic, her visage a facade of tranquility. She did not recoil. She did not avert her gaze. Sophia inclined toward Victor's auditory organ, murmuring with a victorious sneer. She's merely stationed there akin to a sculpture. Excellent, Victor murmured rearward. Permit her to submerge in her own woeful reticence. Subsequently, as Victor navigated, he sensed the ambience alter. The deference he habitually encountered was subtly, inexplicably absent. When he accosted Mr. Harlan, a crucial capital provider, to deliberate a novel undertaking, the elder gentleman proffered merely a slender, non-binding grin. We can deliberate that at a subsequent juncture, Victor. Later, Victor urged, his personal grin sensation constricted. Now constitutes the ideal juncture. But Harlan merely excused himself, and to Victor's complete astonishment, meandered across the chamber toward Elena's subdued alcove. Victor's mandible clenched. Moments later, he accosted Mr. Whitaker, a council affiliate renowned for his obsequious adulation. Whitaker, delighted you could attend, regarding that growth accord. But Whitaker evaded his stare, mumbling something nebulous about necessitating to scrutinize fresh information prior to any pledges. Sophia perceived it, too. She sidled adjacent to him, her tone a subdued, uneasy sibilance. Why do they act so elusive? Ordinarily, they're virtually venerating your authority. They're merely feigning reluctance, Victor retorted, his grin perpetually affixed for the proximate photographers. The marketplace has them alarmed. It concerns not with me. But his eyes betrayed him, darting rearward to Elena, who was now immersed in a subdued, sincere discourse with Mr. Harlan. The capital provider inclined at her, a countenance of profound deference on his visage, prior to clasping her palm. A frigid apprehension, alien and unwelcome, commenced to accumulate in Victor's abdomen. What in blazes does she execute? Refrain from paranoia, Sophia stated, compelling a chortle. She's likely merely fabricating some tempered anecdote, imploring for charity. Victor chortled alongside her, but the timbre was vacant. Why were these potent gentlemen, his gentlemen, regarding his discarded former spouse as though she clutched the realm's keys? Subsequently, amid the principal dish, Victor ascended anew to proffer a salutation. To resilience, he proclaimed, his tone thundering with compelled assurance. To fidelity and to the valor it demands to sever frailty and superfluous burden. He elevated his goblet straight at Elena. Certain individuals are satisfied to lag. I opted to ascend to my radiant ally, Sophia. The chamber acclaimed, but felt compulsory. All recognized who the superfluous burden was. Nora, positioned beside Elena, inclined inward, her tone a vehement murmur. Elena, kindly refrain from permitting him to inflict this upon you. Utter something. Retaliate. But Elena merely imbibed a draught of liquid, her eyes affixed on Victor. Her reticence was not a bulwark. It was an armament being whetted. Why aren't you even incensed? Nora insisted beneath her respiration. Elena grinned subtly. Because a woodland blaze ultimately consumes itself, Nora, all you must do is await the breeze to pivot. Victor elevated his goblet aloft, and thus to Sophia, the ally I invariably merited. May we ascend conjointly loftier than any presumed feasible. Acclamations echoed via the auditorium as Sophia kissed him for the pulsing lenses, but Victor's stare persisted in being drawn, despite his volition, to Elena. She was so composed, so undisturbed, observing him as though she held a confidence he lacked. And for the premier instance that dusk, Victor Langford sensed the disconcerting perception of a hunter who abruptly realizes he might constitute the quarry. The repast vessels were removed. The effervescent persisted in streaming, and Victor navigated the chamber akin to a monarch surveying his territory. Superficially, he was the epitome of authority and mastery. But internally, a subdued alarm was commencing to proliferate. Everywhere he pivoted, individuals were pilfering glimpses at Elena, not with compassion, but with a peculiar, appraising deference. He accosted Mr. Donovan, a council affiliate for over a decade. Donovan, excellent to encounter you. We must conclude the fund procurement for the Tokyo growth. Donovan proffered a taut, courteous grin and gestured with his cranium toward Elena, who was now exchanging a gentle mirth with another substantial capital provider. Perhaps we should await until post your handling of your attendee. Victor's mandible stiffened. My attendee? You imply her? She's a negligible concern. Donovan's eyes conveyed a courteous but remote glimmer. We'll observe. Then he excused himself and strode directly over to Elena. Victor sensed his abdomen contort. At their expanse, Sophia's tone was incisive with vexation. Why do they persist in orbiting her? She appears so unadorned adjacent to me, and yet in some manner refrain from stating it. Victor retorted, his grin cemented in position for a nearby shutterbug. Sophia pressed onward, her insecurity manifesting. In some manner, she's dominating the chamber without uttering a term. It's disquieting. Victor gnashed his dentition. She constitutes a nonentity. I forged her and I dismantled her. That is the actuality. But his personal terms felt akin to a frantic fabrication. A brief interval later, the event overseer tapped the amplifier. Ladies and gentlemen, your focus, if you will. It is my profound privilege to reinstate to the platform the pioneer himself, Mr. Victor Langford, to deliver a few terms regarding the firm's prospect. As acclamation permeated the auditorium, Victor advanced to the platform, immersing in the radiance. His tone was sleek, burnished, and oozing with hubris. This dusk, he initiated, constitutes a commemoration of endurance, of rendering arduous elections, of discerning whom to flank. Langford Enterprises was erected on a singular foresight, and when alliances waver, when certain entities lack the resilience to sustain rhythm, his eyes deliberately glided to Elena. The sole alternative is to advance to superior pursuits. Courteous, uneasy mirth murmured via the spectators. And that is why this dusk, I station myself here proudly with Sophia Grant. He thundered, extending for her palm. A lady of resilience, allure, and drive. A lady who incarnates what it signifies to ascend alongside me. Resounding, if marginally coerced, acclamation detonated. Sophia radiated, but from his elevated position on the platform, Victor could discern Elena at her expanse, still serene, still unyielding, her stare as steadfast as the Polaris. She did not lament. She did not contract. She merely regarded him rearward as composed as a gelid lagoon. The vision dispatched a tremor down his vertebrae. Post his oration, chroniclers swarmed him. Mr. Langford, your schemes for growth. Mr. Langford, how do you counter detractors asserting you've expanded excessively rapidly? He dismissed their inquiries, but then one reporter bellowed, Mr. Langford, any remark on your former spouse's attendance here this dusk? Surely it must prove uncomfortable. Victor sneered for the lenses, seizing the prospect. Not uncomfortable whatsoever. Certain individuals serve as precious teachings. My former spouse is present as a vital memento of my origins and of all I decline to revert to. The auditorium hushed as Victor Langford ascended the platform one ultimate occasion, his grin a rapacious shimmer beneath the pendants. The capital providers, the council affiliates, the chroniclers, all oculars affixed on him. Ladies and gentlemen, he proclaimed, this dusk concerns not merely commemorating our bygone triumphs. It pertains to inaugurating our prospect. I am proud to proclaim a landmark fusion that shall elevate Langford Enterprises into a fresh epoch of international supremacy. Acclamation commenced to amplify, but it was truncated. The council chairperson, Mr. Eldridge, a gentleman of vast sway and subdued decorum, ascended gradually from his perch. His tone, amplified via the amplifier, sliced via the chamber prior to Victor, could persist. Mr. Langford, he stated, his timbre resolute and lucid. Prior to your continuation, there exists another participant we desire to heed. Victor stiffened, his grin wavering. Pardon me, Eldridge. Eldridge's stare shifted across the ocean of countenances, alighting on one. He elevated his palm and gestured, Madam Hargrove, would you deign to perform the distinction? The chamber descended into a quietude so profound it was thunderous. Every cranium in the auditorium swiveled. Elena Hargrove perched at her expanse, balanced and serene, her ebony satin frock a gash of obscurity against the radiant aureate. She refrained from motioning initially, permitting the burden of the instant to descend over the chamber. Victor's chortle fractured the quietude, a resounding, coerced, unsightly timbre. Eldridge, you must err. Elena holds no commerce here. She constitutes an attendee, a remnant. She is not a remnant. Victor, Eldridge interjected, his tone resounding with command. She constitutes the prospect. Inhalations detonated. A conflagration of murmurs swept via the auditorium. Chroniclers scrambled for their records, their lenses pulsing in a frenzied delirium. Victor blinked, his coerced chortle expiring in his gullet. What? What did you just articulate? Eldridge stationed himself loftier, his countenance unassailable. Via a sequence of tactical and unobtrusive procurements across the prior 36 months, Elena Hargrove has obtained a majority equity in Langford Enterprises, operative instantaneously. She retains the dominant stake. The chamber detonated into turmoil. Timbers clashed. Perches scraped against the flooring. Murmurs evolved into a thunder. Victor's visage drained of all hue. He resembled a gentleman who had been pierced. No, that's inconceivable. I would have discerned. Ultimately, Elena ascended from her perch. The assembly divided for her akin to the crimson sea as she advanced toward the platform. Each tap of her heels on the stone flooring was a percussion of fate, composed, intentional, inexorable. She attained the amplifier, and her tone, though gentle, incised via the uproar with precise acuity. You never discerned, Victor, she initiated, her eyes affixing onto his. That was invariably your lethal imperfection. You solely ever perceived what resounded, what gleamed, what nourished your self-importance. You never troubled to observe what was reticent, what advanced in obscurity, what patiently bided. He oscillated his cranium, his form quivering. This constitutes a ruse, a belligerent, illicit plot. You don't merit this platform. She pivoted from him, addressing the council affiliates and capital providers straightforwardly. Examine your archives. Examine the submissions. Every equity was procured lawfully via a lattice of containment firms I erected from inception. For 3 years, while you occupied yourself deriding me and fabricating your deceptions, I occupied myself constructing. I was procuring. And thus, this dusk, I do not station myself here as your attendee, Victor. She paused, permitting the complete burden of her subsequent terms to descend akin to an anchor. I station myself here as your novel superior. The chamber detonated anew, but this occasion with cheers. Capital providers sprang to their feet, clapping, some even inclining their crania in deference. The pulsing lenses were blinding, seizing the precise instant a dominion altered custodians. Victor lurched rearward, his visage a facade of terror. No, no, you cannot inflict this upon me. I erected this firm. This constitutes my existence's labor. Elena's stare was unswerving. You erected it upon my labor, on my bolstering, on my reticence. You misconstrued my reticence for frailty, but you erred. Reticence, Victor, is simply forbearance refining its keenness. Sophia, her visage pallid, clutched Victor's limb. Affirm to me this isn't voracious. Affirm to me she doesn't. Silence. Victor shrieked ferociously, shaking her loose. He pivoted rearward to the council, his tone a frantic, splintering supplication. You cannot align with her. She's not. Mr. Whitaker ascended from his perch. Quite the contrary, Victor, she constitutes the majority proprietor. As of this instant, you retain no command here, Mr. Donovan appended, his tone akin to frost. Operative instantaneously. Your role as CEO is concluded. The council aligns with Madam Hargrove. The cheers and acclamation amplified louder and more authentic than any Victor had ever attained. His eyes protruded, his tone ascending to a wail. You turncoats, all of you affection. I enriched you, and you became negligent, Elena stated gently, her tone once again silencing the entire chamber. Authority erected on brutality invariably consumes itself. You endeavored to render me diminutive, Victor. You endeavored to inter me, but you overlooked one pivotal element. Veracity doesn't necessitate clamor. It merely necessitates awaiting the appropriate instant to arise. Her terms suspended airborne, absolute and conclusive. Victor lurched forward, directing a quivering digit at her. You'll lament this, Elena. I'll annihilate you. She encountered his pathetic menace devoid of an iota of apprehension. No, Victor, you'll lament that you didn't annihilate me when opportunity permitted. Council affiliates commenced to advance toward the platform as pre-informed protective personnel advanced. Victor perceived, then, that this was authentic. This was determination. Sophia, discerning the vessel submerging, wrenched her limb from his, her tone shrill with wrath. You assured me she was concluded, that she possessed naught. How could you prove so obtuse? Dare not attribute fault to me, Victor snarled, but his terms had forfeited all potency. Sophia's visage contorted into a facade of unadulterated revulsion. You're not now. Do you genuinely presume I'm descending with you? She pivoted on her heel and stormed away, the lenses avidly trailing her withdrawal, seizing every instant of her craven disloyalty. Sophia, Victor summoned after her, his tone fracturing. Dare not depart from me. But she never glanced rearward. The chairperson elevated his tone over the din, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly unite me in greeting Elena Hargrove as the novel proprietor and dominant overseer of Langford Enterprises. The assembly thundered its endorsement. Elena stationed herself tall, her countenance serene. She did not grin. She did not exult. She merely elevated a palm for quietude. This instant, she stated, her tone resonating with subdued potency, concerns not retribution. It pertains to reinstatement. For years, I was depicted as frail, as an inadequacy, as a lady whose merit was bound to the gentleman she flanked. But the actuality is decorum can never be seized from you. It can solely be yielded, and I never ever yielded mine. The chamber was immobile, her terms cascading over them. Victor, pallid and quivering, executed one ultimate frantic endeavor. Pardon, Elena, refrain from this. We can negotiate a resolution. Her eyes softened for a fractional second, not with compassion, but with a profound, conclusive melancholy for the gentleman he might have been. You possess your opportunity to construct a realm alongside me, Victor. You opted to endeavor to incinerate mine instead. Now you remain stationed amid the cinders you generated. The protective attendant advanced and gently, but resolutely seized his limbs. He sagged, vanquished as they escorted him toward the egress, a procession of pulsing lenses chronicling his complete ignominy. Elena observed him depart, her cranium elevated, not in reprisal, but in the subdued triumph of a spirit reinstated. The gentleman who had once publicly stigmatized her inadequacy was now departing his personal banquet, bereft of his firm, his betrothed and his self-regard, and Elena Hargrove, the lady he had cast aside, now stationed at the indisputable core of the dominion he had foolishly presumed solely his. As the dusk drew to closure, Nora hastened to her flank, her eyes gleaming with lacrimal fluid. Elena, you accomplished it. I cannot credit it. You truly accomplished it. Elena contacted her companion's limb gently. No, Nora, veracity accomplished it. It merely required a modicum of duration. She pivoted to confront the chamber, the metropolis, and her prospect, her cranium elevated. The murmurs that once endeavored to devastate her were now articulating her designation with naught but reverence. And for the premier instance in a profoundly protracted span, Elena Hargrove departed a conflict not fractured, not resentful, but integral. Her reticence had ultimately been comprehended. The gale had dissipated, and Victor Langford was naught but a wraith. What Elena's chronicle imparts to us is a profound precept regarding merit. Certain individuals, akin to Victor, discern the cost of all, but the merit of naught. They cannot esteem fidelity. They cannot esteem legacy. And they cannot esteem the subdued resilience of a person who declines to fracture. Elena's triumph wasn't solely about reclaiming a firm. It concerned reclaiming her personal storyline. It concerned demonstrating that authentic authority isn't resounding or haughty. It's forbearing. It's resilient. And it's erected on a base of unassailable uprightness. Her chronicle serves as a memento to us all that the realm may endeavor to delineate you, to designate you, to render you diminutive, but your merit, your decorum is yours and yours solely. Never yield it. Express gratitude for accompanying us on this extraordinary odyssey. If Elena's chronicle of resilience stirred you, kindly manifest your endorsement by endorsing this video and disseminating it with an individual who might require heeding this dispatch. Refrain from overlooking to subscribe and depress the alert chime so you can integrate us for more potent chronicles. Until the subsequent occasion, remain resilient, trust in your personal merit, and never, ever permit any entity to mute your veracity.